So let's jump into this, and I want this to be a little bit interactive if possible, and so I'm sorry I'm going to be like walking back and forth, like pushing this button, doing the old-fashioned way. So, the point I'm making and what I've learned is that, in my opinion, traditional marketing is broken, right? And I use this example of movie theaters, movies, right? Like, what a stupid, stupid business model. You spend $200 million making a movie, and you spend another $200 million actually pitching and actually marketing this movie, and then how many times you've seen these movies like make nothing, right? You spend like almost $400 million, and then you make like $10 million in the theater. And for me, this is one of the signs that the traditional ways of actually marketing is not working at all. And there's lots and lots of other examples, all right? And I think the big reason for this is because of the separation of product, developing the product, and actually the marketing piece of it. At least that's my opinion, right? How many times when I was at Yahoo, how I learned marketing at Yahoo, when the company was relatively small to when it became very, very big, changed a lot, right? What would happen is the product team makes a product and they go, okay, marketing people, throw it over the wall, go market this thing. And that's actually the reason that leads to this. What this number? What do you think this number is? 75%. Any ideas? Anybody? Guess.
It's all money.
75%, this is the number of new product launches that actually fail in the first year. So this is taken from like FMCG and consumer electronics. This is actually the number of new product launches that fail every single year, right? That's a lot, right? Think about how many billions of dollars that you spend on product development, let alone the marketing piece. And I think the reason for this, in my opinion, is because of this gap between sort of product as well as between sort of the marketing, right? And so it leads to this thing called growth hacking. I don't really like this term, but this is something that actually has come out of Silicon Valley over the last 4 to 5 years. And this is about finding product to market fit. Jump into this. So you go, what is product to market fit? And I think this is the hardest thing any business, whether you're a large company or you are a startup, to find, right? So Marc Andreessen, hopefully everyone knows Marc Andreessen. He's co-founder of Netscape, right, the original browser, and now he runs a VC fund, $4 billion under management, one of the top VC funds in the Valley, and actually one of our investors. Product market fit means being in a good market with a product that can satisfy that market. Like, okay, what else does that actually mean? More, all right? So, in my opinion, product market fit is it's kind of like pornography, right? Like you know it when you see it, and product to market fit is that you basically launch a product and all of a sudden it's like growing like this, automatically without doing anything. And these, give you examples of products like that. Slack, right? The most recent one. You guys know Slack? Right? Like that one just exploded, right? But you know how long it took them to get to product market fit? That was a game before. And they tweaked the product and changed things around. It took them 2 to 3 years to go and figure out product to market fit, right? And so the most important thing, how I think you need to get to product to market fit, and this is where most startups fail, is they never get to product to market fit, right? It's very, very obvious. Most new products, most startups fail because you don't get to product to market fit, all right? And this is actually what we call like the valley of death. All right? And so the first most important thing you have to do is validate the product service. So for me, it's like doing surveys and understanding. If you have 1,000 users and you're asking these questions, Sean Ellis, who's a guy who was original growth hacker, is a friend of mine, he said, you do surveys to understand. He's done consulting for like Dropbox and like all these really, really well-known companies. And he said, I knew Dropbox actually had product market fit when you actually did surveys of their customer base. And you said, if this product disappeared, how bad would you feel about it, right? Like, would you be like, would you feel really, 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 really bad and feel this big gaping hole in your life if this product failed? If you hit at least 40% of your audience and your customer base actually said that you actually would have some level of product market fit. The best companies have close to 60% of that, right? Anything less than 40% that say that means you do not have product market fit. It's just one number, all right, depending on the industry. I think the other part is actually really understanding how to get here, is actually understanding what the value proposition is, and understanding who the right customer segment is. In early stage startups, and I've had lots of meetings here, I had lots of meetings everywhere, and they're like, my customer is like these guys, and these guys, and these guys, and these guys. I'm like, but that actually, you should be focusing on one segment only and making them very, very, very happy, right? And the next part, and which I think I'll cover a little bit in this conversion rate optimization, is assuming you have these things, you need to make it very, very easy for them to actually get to the product sort of experience, right? So removing all friction and barriers to it. And last one is figuring out like customer sort of like acquisition channels. So once you figure out all these pieces, it's like how can you get more of these people through like new sales channels and marketing channels. And I don't cover this because I normally do this talk, like it's usually like a 5-hour talk and workshop. And so I had to cut this presentation down to sort of as simple as I possibly could. So I think it's only 60 slides. I cut off like this usually is like about 200 slides. So I kept it very, very simple. Right? Yes?
Can you have the full version of the presentation?
Yeah, I think they're going to send this over to you. So, but the problem with just one caveat, this full 200 slides, it is not going to be helpful for you if you actually don't, like I have a lot of images and things, so it's less, you're going to look at it and like, I don't know what this is. And so you'll get this slide, but like the other one is like, it's just massive, so, and it won't be helpful for you.
Maybe
Could you tell how do you make it survey? Because it seems like the product could be from 0 to 1, or from 0 to infinity. I mean, something could be innovative, let's say like WhatsApp, there wasn't anything like that, and they did great, or Instagram, Facebook, and there are some products which is like a slab. I mean, it's a cumulative of a lot of services which actually existed. But how do you do survey? I mean, how do you know what people want?
Oh, so just to clarify, right? This is actually for your customer base, your live customer base with a real product or an MVP. Does it make sense? It's not like a made-up product. Like, what would you like about this thing? It's actually like you have users. If you have a mobile app and you have like say 100 users, you know, say it's like 40 of them, right? Like, that's not a great number, but you get my point. I'm just keeping the numbers.
The thing that what I want to say is that as Steve Jobs actually said, if you ask people what they want, they would know what they want. I mean,
depends, and I would say, like, I think too many people are like drawing conclusions of just like, well, Steve Jobs said this, so this must be true. It's like, depends on the product, depends on sort of, and most people are not Steve Jobs, so like most people will never figure it out, and you should not, like, I hate it when people, I'm sorry, no offense, but I hate it when people quote Steve Jobs, because like, look, you're not Steve Jobs, there's no Steve Jobs here, there's a Steve Jobs like every generation, all right? If you pretend and use quotes from him, it's stupid, because you're not him, and it's a waste of time, right? Like, you need to go and figure out your own sort of, I don't know, you get my point.
Yeah. We stick to the presentation, or it's fine to ask questions? I mean,
I do whatever. This is your workshop, so I'll do whatever you guys want. I'm very easy. I just want this to be a value for you guys. So if you have something like I talk very quickly, I have very strong views, and so if I say something that's not clear or you just like you want more elaboration, ask me. I'm happy to answer, right? Because this is supposed to be a workshop. Did I sort of answer your question?
yeah, I got one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends, right? And I think most of the time, just for these newer products and new features or new whatever, you actually can never know until you launch. That's my opinion. So a lot of this is actually based on a launch product or some MVP at least. Okay. And my bias is always like launch before you have like launch and then you have data. Data helps you drive decisions, right? Otherwise, you're just guessing. All right, so these are the metrics to measure if you're trying to figure out product to market fit, right? So it's growth in the usage of like the product, right? Is it growing? You know, are people spending more time? Are transactions going up, whether daily, weekly, monthly? You know, are you seeing the growth of sort of repeat users and customers as a percentage of the total customer base that you have? And referrals. So NPS, you know what NPS is? Yeah, Net Promoter Scores. It's awesome, right? And so there's actually real methodology of like NPS scores. So you can even send surveys of like, what is the likelihood, give me a ranking from 1 to 5 of the likelihood that you would recommend my product or service to your friends. And it's actually a good gauge. You can actually measure. So I'll give you an example. When I was at Yahoo, what had happened was that we had this, I'm not going to mention any names, but we used to be very, very well known for customer service and very, very well known on the sales operations side. And then one day, management decided to basically outsource a lot of our sales operations to India. And it was really interesting when you're tracking like NPS scores. It was just this blew me away when I look back on it. We're like, our NPS scores were going down. We used to do NPS scores every 2 quarters. In 2008, 2009, our NPS scores went down consecutively, basically 3 studies basically in a row. And we saw our sales drop off a cliff literally a year after that, right? So it's really interesting as a leading indicator to see. We have longer sales cycles, which is why you'll see this sort of like lag time, because we're a B2B company. Yahoo is a B2B company. And so it's really interesting, just like NPS scores are actually good leading indicators to see, like, are you getting customer satisfaction? So something I actually recommend startups and large companies to do. It's very easy to do. You can use SurveyMonkey and just do like a survey. All right. And this is what we call like the light bulb. I use this analogy is called the aha moment, right? The aha moment is when a customer or somebody goes and uses your product and they're like, oh, now I actually understand the value of what this thing actually does for me, right? So for example, the aha moment for like Twitter, like they figured out that once you actually added like 10, you actually went and followed like 10 people on Twitter, you're like, oh, now I see, I can actually track the people I actually really like. Or like LinkedIn, right? Like the aha moment of LinkedIn was like, hey, I actually put up my resume on LinkedIn, I can actually like link up with all these people I meet, and I can keep track of them, right? Like, or Facebook, right? Like, the aha moment of Facebook, you find out very, very quickly, and it only makes sense when you have people sort of connected to you. So this is what, like, ultimately, what you're trying to get customers to, is that the aha moment when they understand and realize the value that your product or service is actually delivering for them. You're like, wow, this is so obvious. It actually is not obvious, and it's actually not that easy to figure out.
Sometimes it takes longer.
For most companies, it takes anywhere between 2 to 5 years to figure this out.
I didn't get this Twitter, this aha moment.
Yeah, and some people get it and some people don't, right? I think if you are not like in my opinion, if you're in the tech space, you're really just in tech space, Twitter is really, really good. And because I follow a lot of my investor friends, I follow a lot of my startup friends, and like, oh, it's interesting to sort of see how they think. Some people follow movie stars or whatever, right? And so the use case is very different for different people. But you're in Silicon Valley and you're not on Twitter, it's weird, as an example, right? Or just like Facebook, or LinkedIn, or whatever, or Pinterest, right? Pinterest, of the user cases usually, you know how Pinterest actually started off, the use case was actually like housewives in the Midwest, right? Because are you familiar with like this, what's this term, like in offline, it's like scrapbooks,
Yeah.
Scrapbooks, right? Like like, I'm stereotyping, right? But if you are like a woman, like you're a housewife and you're cutting, I'm sorry, I don't mean to stereotype, but like now what Pinterest is, and why the use case for Pinterest was why like women in the Midwest did that. Before they used to do scrapbooks, and now they're just doing this online and pinning pictures and images and stuff. And that's actually the main use case, right? Like that's the aha moment, and that's why it works, right? And Pinterest is doing very, very well. Does that make sense so far? Okay. And so why do this, right? Like, why growth and why do this sort of tactic is, number one, traditional marketing growth channels are really expensive and hyper competitive, right? Because you're competing against big companies, and in some cases, and one example would be like SEM, right? Like SEM for startups used to be really, really awesome using Google AdWords. I'm going to talk about my experience in the US. Like 8 years ago, like all startups just did like SEM, search engine marketing, and probably in this region it's Yandex, right? But now it's become mainstream, so big companies now are actually, when big companies come into marketing channels, they become really expensive and crowded, right? And so now you're seeing startups using like Facebook ads now, because it's generally cheaper, and big companies have not necessarily woken up to sort of like the opportunity that actually Facebook ads are. And I think the other part is that in companies in this situation, like startups, when you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of time, like it doesn't make sense to compete against these like really, really crowded spaces, right? So you should, as an example, like most startups don't do SEM anymore. A lot of startups are using SEO, or they're doing things like Facebook ads as a general. And they're even trying out new channels like Pinterest. If you're e-commerce related, Pinterest is an amazing, amazing channel, because a lot of the big companies haven't figured out like Pinterest and aren't advertising in it yet. And the other part is just it's almost like guerrilla warfare, right? Like, why did the US, on paper, and I'm Canadian and American, so just like on paper you go, Vietnam War, America is a country that was like 4 times larger than Vietnam, right? Has way more money, has way more gun, sort of power. How did they lose this war against like the Vietnamese? They lost this war because the Americans were like heavy-handed. They didn't, they weren't. It's just like guerrilla warfare, right? And this is actually growth hacking is guerrilla warfare. It's something startups have to do because you don't have the money, you don't have the resources, you don't have the people, and so you have to try like different new things that big companies are just too stupid and slow to figure out. Does it make sense? And yeah, so this is what growth hacking is, right? So it's about, I'm not going to read through this, but the idea is about being smarter and not spending more, right? It's about being cost effective and being creative. And the other part is actually trying to get maximum ROI on your time and your money, your very little bit of money that you actually spend, all right? And yeah, and so who are these people? It's actually, oh great, Anton, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you here.
You're working? Oh,
Sorry.
lovely. That's great.
That's
It's
right.
always awkward, like do this. So, what is this? Who does these things? It's a hybrid of marketing, product, and engineering, right? Like this is a very specialized role. And I think the other thing is that you're trying to optimize your user acquisition and to actually allow this to grow. And the other part is actually to drive exponential growth. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? We'll get into that. And so here's what it is. It's a process, right? Everyone talks about the viral growth. Viral growth is bullshit, all right? Sorry, I swore. Viral growth is crap, all right? Everyone talks about it. The only products that actually have viral growth are like communications products, like Messenger, Slack. Most other products are SaaS, B2B, e-commerce. There is no viral growth in there. So if that's your strategy for growing, you're an idiot and you should shut down your company because it doesn't make any sense, all right? But to get to this process of growth, it's all these things, right? Understanding landing page optimization, SEO, onboarding, UX, behavioral economics, email marketing, product marketing, all these things is actually what drives growth hacking, all right? You need to have some basic understanding of these pieces. Number two, activation, right? When they actually come and use your experience, it's like, do they actually get through this point? Three, retention, do they come back? And hopefully many, many, many times. Referral, you're so happy with the product and service, you tell your friends and tell other people, right? And finally, hopefully revenue, right? Like ultimately that's what you care about. You know where most people screw up? They screw up on the acquisition side. The hardest thing to actually do, and I'll say screw up, which is screw up in the sense of they focus all their energy on acquisition and they do not think about the activation retention piece. This is the hardest piece to do, all right? Because they're like, oh great, I'm gonna spend money. I worked at a company that spent almost $500,000 a month on ads, all right? They raised quite a lot of money. They raised about $45 million, right? So very, very different. But the issue is that, think about this, right? If you have 200 million downloads in your app and you have 20 million monthly users, is that good or bad? Is that good or bad?
Could you repeat numbers?
200 million downloads in your mobile app, but you have 20 million monthly users. Is that good or bad?
Each month?
Yeah, so total downloads they've had, 200 million.
It depends on how much you spend on those.
Yeah. It's really, really bad, right? Because that basically means your activation retention rate is horrible. It's tiny, right? Like, so you've gotten 200 million people to download your app and you have 20 million monthly users. That sucks. And you're spending $500,000 a month acquiring users, right? So you're just basically, you might as well just burn that money because it's getting you nothing, right? Because you're churning people. And the bad thing about it is that you're sending people to a bad experience and they're never going to come back. Question?
Isn't it like conversion 10%?
I'm sorry.
It like depends, I think, because, for example, if these 20 million users are bringing you some profit.
Yeah, I mean, they're making money. It wasn't bad, right? But the point about this is that you're churning through users and churning through customers. And we knew basically the product sucked, right? The product had major issues. It would have been better for him to basically take that $500,000 and hire engineers, take that $500,000 and actually go and build the product and fix the product before you actually spend on acquisition, right? That's the way you have to think about this. And so for me, it's like, take a look at the funnel. Where are people dropping off, right? What is the biggest issue? So let's just say acquisition is not a problem, right? What I find for most startups in general, it's usually an activation retention issue. And I can tell you, it takes a long time. I worked with a company, they had probably about 10 million downloads. And the problem was just like, they just couldn't retain any users. It took us close to 9 months to figure out the activation issue. There's a lot of surveys, changing the product. It was painful. And this is actually where, for companies who actually have money and resources, if you actually have money, do you know the thing that most companies do because this is easier and you want to look good? Spend more money on acquisition, right? Bring in more people and you hope that when actually the right thing to do is actually focus on the activation retention piece. Does that make sense? It's very basic, but it's not, it's just like the mentality is like, well, I just need to drive more people. And I think there are other questions you have to ask yourself if your retention rates and activation rates are terrible. It's like, are we targeting the right people, right? So maybe we're bringing all the wrong people into, down the funnel. I mean, this raises a lot of questions. And so the other part is like, measuring, basically the conversion at each step, right? So let's say you acquire 1,744 sort of people, and then you end up with 174 people who actually activated, and you only retaining 52. Where do you focus? Where do you think the biggest problem is? There's no right or wrong answer, but where do do you think the biggest problem is?
Activation.
The number of activation that you've done.
So say that again, I didn't hear it.
The number of activation people that actually from activation.
Yeah, so the big question is, okay, so I understand.
The
The hypothesis is, right, my hypothesis is the fact that activation rates suck. I had to steal it, but it's really good. I think when you actually look at this and you read this in detail, you're like, wow, this actually makes sense, right? It looks simple, really, really, really hard to do. All right, and so the biggest thing about growth hacking is all about riding a platform, right? You look at these companies, I hope you recognize these companies, right? LinkedIn, Zynga, Airbnb, PayPal, every single one of them actually grew on the back of a very, very big platform. So for example, LinkedIn grew on the back of email, right? Everyone has email. Zynga grew on the back of Facebook, right? Zynga would not be the company if there was not social sharing on the social graph on Facebook. Airbnb basically hacked Craigslist. PayPal will only grow on the back of eBay, right? So a lot of growth hacking is about finding these big channels, right? So like Pinterest, or even WeChat, which is like a messenger service, or Yandex, or whatever, but finding these very, very high growth sort of like platforms that you can actually ride. And so one example, for example, the oldest example back in like, I think in like the late 90s was Hotmail, right? Like just by putting this little, by putting this little sort of like, sentence at the bottom of the link, like they just blew up, right? And remember, this is back in the day when 12 million users was a lot. It doesn't seem like a lot right now, but back in the 90s, this was a lot of users in a very, very short period of time. Airbnb, the example, right? Like, you know how Airbnb grew? They basically used like they didn't even have the API on Craigslist, but they built this tool that actually put like their listings automatically on Craigslist. It's actually illegal now, so like Craigslist, when they found out, they shut it down. But this is actually how they got critical mass for their marketplace. And so the basic principles, right? User engagement is way more important than growth hacking. You need to be looking at when users are showing up, are they actually actively using your product, right? Second part, retention is way more important than the acquisition side, right? Context is more important than activity. So somebody told I've met some startups that are like, oh, I have like 1 million page views, right? You're like, well, that isn't necessarily a good thing. That just means that you might have a crappy service and they're just spending a lot of time trying to find what they have. That isn't necessarily a good thing, right? The other part is like, sometimes it's actually better to actually have your own growth channels versus like using somebody else's external channels. Like what happens if Facebook goes and changes their algorithm, then you're done, right? And so you need to almost have a mixture of like your own channels as well as sort of like other people's channels, because you can get cut off, right? The reason Zynga sort of lost growth was because Facebook changed the social graph. They got killed, and that was a big problem for them. They have not been able to find new growth channels at Zynga, as an example, right? And the other part is that it's actually much more important being valuable than being social, right? I think too many people go and think like, well, we're going to be viral, and we're going to just add like a Facebook, sharing sort of like link at the bottom. And it's like, that's actually not your priority. Your priority is just making something actually useful and valuable, and then they're more likely to share it, and then that's when it makes sense to actually put in the sharing features. Right? Okay, so these are some good examples of growth hacks, right? WhatsApp, Twitter, Dropbox, they did growth hacking very, very, very well. Right? And I can give you examples, we can go into detail on this one. And bad examples, Branch Out and Video. Have you heard of these companies? That's probably why. All right, anyways. But the interesting things about Branch Out, so Branch Out. So this example, right? Branch Out, they did this weird game, right? So like they basically went and took this, they took this hack from like Facebook, and they went and took like your social, you basically took your social graph, right? And they said, okay, you know all these people, and they made this game, right? They made this game where it's like, would you rather work with Joe versus John, right? And then you kind of clicked on it, it's like incredibly viral and it's incredibly sort of attractive. And so they just drove up, tons of people came to Branch Out. But the problem, so this is what happened, right? Massive, massive growth. But the problem is, you know what Branch Out is? Branch Out is a job site. And so that game didn't really have anything to job. So you play the game, so you can go and say, hey, this is really addictive. You play for a while. After you're done, you're like, okay, what do I do with this now? And so they had this big spike, and then this big drop off in users because people are like, there's no clear next step. And so that company raised, I mean, 12 or $15 million, and like nothing. They got sold for like an acqui-hire, right? It was not a success. And so that was one of the problems, right? Like they were able to acquire a lot of users, but they actually were not able to activate or retain them. That's a bad example. Video is another example. Like this company here, Vidi, they use a social graph on Facebook as well too for videos. So it was like viral videos. The problem though, they drove a lot of people into Vidi, and there was like, the product actually wasn't very good. So it was a massive drop off in the product. And that's why they got acqui-hired too. So they were very well-known examples of like growth hacking. People who learned to do growth hacking without really understanding the activation and retention piece. Okay? All right. And so, all right. So assume that you have figured out acquisition. This is one part that I think like too many people actually ignore. It's this term called conversion rate optimization, right? And so what we talk about is this example I used before, the company I worked with, right? It's about you have to figure out what your conversion funnel is. So what happens when you focus all your energy on acquisition and you don't figure out the activation retention piece? It's just like a leaky bucket, right? So you keep on filling with water, keep on filling with users, but the users just keep on leaking out of the bottom, right? It's a big waste of time. And that's the other big part I'm going to make. The other big point I'm going to make is that when you have the same situation happen, when a user comes to use your service or product or whatever, and they're unhappy, the likelihood of them coming back is really, really low, right? Like, think about it, we're all busy, right? You download an app and you're like, oh, this is cool, and you're like, oh man, this app sucks. Take it off your phone. What's the likelihood you're going to come back again, right? Any service, or you go to a shopping site and you can't find what you're looking for, and you're like, yeah, whatever, I don't need this anymore. Right? It's the exact same. We're all busy people. And so when you lose that chance, right, you literally have one chance to get people to the aha moment. If you miss that chance, your likelihood of getting to the aha moment and having them come back again disappears. I think it's tiny. Right? So why would you do that? And so this is HIPPO, right? You know what HIPPO, this is the term HIPPO? It's the highest paid person's opinion, right? And this is actually a big issue with a lot of big corporations. Actually, it's a big issue in startups too, right? Oh, the CEO says I need to do this. And I have this in my opinion, right? So we have this joke called the HIPPO, which is like, beware the HIPPO, the highest paid person's opinion. And this is actually a big problem, and it kills startups. And so, what we talk about is having a structured and systematic approach to basically improving the performance of your website or your app. And a lot of this is based on user feedback and analytics, and having clear KPIs and objectives. And then taking the traffic that you have and making sure your conversion rates are even better. And you go, yeah, this is so obvious, but this is probably one of the hardest things to do, right? Because it's not sexy, it takes a lot of time and a lot of work, and like I said, the biggest part's not sexy, and it takes a long time. And so why do you do this, right? You can always improve. Number two, paid advertising is getting more expensive and competitive. Optimization is about getting the right kind of customers, and is basically free, lowers your customer acquisition costs, and helps you maximize your profits, right? And a lot of the best e-commerce companies are doing this on a regular basis. And on top of that, because you're making more money, it actually gives you more money to spend on acquiring more users. That's actually how you get like the virtual sort of cycle, right? And so, anyways, you want to figure out cost per acquisition. It's your cost per click divided by sort of your conversion rate, right? So hopefully you know this. If you don't, here's a formula, very basic. And so these are some great books if you actually want to learn more about conversion rate optimization and UX. You have the slides, so you have to take a picture. But it's Stephen Krug's Don't Make Me Think. Awesome book, and it's actually great term in general. If you're pitching investors, it's also a great term as well too for customers. You should not make the customer think too much, all right? People are lazy, people are dumb, you should not make them think. And the other part is actually how to build a website. And investors are dumb and lazy too, right? I'm one of them. If I go here and pitch and you're like, oh, you're making me do work, I'm not going to invest. It's so much easier saying no, so keep that in mind, all right? These applications are beyond just your website and your app and your product. It's actually for your life too. Pep Laha is awesome. This book is great, right? So how to build websites that sell. These principles are universal for your mobile app, for whatever service that you actually have. Strongly recommend it. It's a worthwhile investment. So worth reading these books. And so the other part is it's about scientific method, right? You have a hypothesis, what's working or isn't working, what do the users want, and actually how do they want it, right? And now then it's about testing it, right? So there's different ways you can test it. Look at heat maps. All these products, a lot of these products are cheap, they're cloud services, and they're, and you can actually, some of them are freemium, right? There's web analytics, Google Analytics is free, user surveys, use like SurveyMonkey, there's like funnel analysis services, there's usability tests, like there's this great product called Qualaroo, Sean Ellis, that's his company, awesome. I'm just like, all these awesome tools are available now. And so, consideration for a better website. I need to fix that. Personas, right? For all the people I mentored today, I asked a lot, is like, what's your persona, right? Who's your hypothesis, who the customer is? Who do they look like? What do they look like? What's their age? Even if it's a hypothesis. It's a very basic thing, right? If you're a shopping site, are you targeting, is your persona men? Is it women? What age group? Is it moms? At least have an idea, all right? I just think, like, for me, when I meet startups, they have no idea who their end customer is, or at least they don't have a hypothesis of what a persona looks like. I'm not ever going to invest in it, right? That means you don't know what you're doing, you've not done your homework. And the other part is, it's about targeting the right people. And the other part about this is your ads and landing page need to have the exact same message as targeted to these people. And the thing is, are you solving a problem that the customer has, and how are you validating this stuff, right? So understand the motivation and relevancy of the message that you're actually presenting. Understand the buying phases, right? Are they in the research phase? Is your product helping in the research phase or the buying phase? And then just try to understand sort of, what kind of, what are the different sort of paths that they should be taking, and test them. And then the other one, what is the action item that you want to do? Is it joining a newsletter, leaving an email, win some prize, buy the product? What is the call to action? What do you want them to do? I mean, it is amazing looking at a lot of people's websites. They're just like, so I go to this website, there's no clear call to action. What's the value proposition? What are you offering? And these are all questions that you should be running through your site, running through your mobile app. Every single page, like, what's the point of this? What's the so what of this, right? Who is this for? What's the user benefit? You should have clear answers for this, all right? And you're like, yeah, this is boring. Yeah, it's boring, but these are all the basic things that nobody does well. And so, clear things of value proposition, has to be unique, has to be very, very short, has to be memorable, right? No jargon, right? Desirable, is this actually fit? And very, very specific for them. Yeah, okay, so yeah, some clarity, right? Where am I? What can I do here? I mean, you can read this all yourself, right? But the point is just like, I think it's almost like a checklist, like you need to go through your site and just like, does it fit these things? Because if it doesn't, you're probably doing something wrong. If it's not clear, right? Just like, because you have to understand, most users are not you, right? Most of your customers are not you. The challenge that all startup founders and startup product people, you're working on this thing for such a long time, you know it better than anybody else, and sometimes you forget that most of your customers coming to your site or your mobile app don't actually know who you are, right? And are not as committed, so obviously they don't know what you're doing, right? And so these are some things that I would ask, right, throughout this presentation. And the other part is like, is the process complicated? Is it long? Website ugly? Do you understand what to do? Is there enough information? I mean, these are all things that you can actually test. And is there a sense of urgency, right? Like, so what? Like, assuming that you're trying to drive them to buy something, like, is there urgency? Is there time limitations? And even using things like holidays or seasonality to drive sort of like them to do the act that you want them to do. And of course, you should have one main action for each page. Not like you're asking to do one thing, right? One clear call to action, right? And the other part is like, what should I do next? And then on top of that, just like, what can you get rid of, right? So what you're trying to do is make the message as simple as possible with one clear action item. How many times you've gone to websites and you're like, there's asking you like 3 different things, and so a user gets confused, you're like, I'm just going to do nothing. Right? It's a paradox of choice. Great book. Another book I recommend, and it gives you the basics of A/B testing and a lot of methodology. And I think like if you want to learn the basics of CRO, like conversion rate optimization, like this guy runs like an agency, like amazing, just like he works with tons of awesome companies out of Canada. And he's a great speaker too. And so A/B testing, right? So this is a methodology of testing these things. Which one works better? So A/B testing came from pharmaceuticals, from pharmaceutical testing, right? Joe gets a drug, John does not get the drug, and then you test the results afterwards. It's no different. You have 2 versions, right? Version A, version B, and you run the test, hopefully based on a statistically significant sort of audience, run the test and see if there's any significant changes, in the messaging, and then you try to identify what are the drivers of the changes. Is it because of the design? Is it because of the call to action? And this is the basics of growth in CRO, right? And so this is an example, right? Like trying to do these things. And so obviously trying to figure out which one has the highest conversion rate. This is one example. Live example. The one hard part about A/B testing that you need to understand and why growth is so difficult is because 9 out of 10 of your tests that you run are actually going to be inconclusive. That's actually why a lot of people give up, right? I mean, a lot of startups like, I did this A/B testing thing, ran 3 tests, didn't work. And I'm like, no, that's actually, if you look at the really, really great companies who do this on a regular basis, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, they all have Pinterest, they all have growth teams. Actually, a lot of the big Silicon Valley companies all have growth teams, and they're running dozens of tests every single day or every single week.
Yeah.
And do you know why they're doing that? Even Yahoo did it.
It was a search partner.
Huh?
It was a search
Yeah,
partner.
yeah, Google too. I mean, you're just seeing all these different changes. Amazon does tons of A/B testing, and the reason you do this is because you're learning new things on a regular basis, right? Like, what are the users doing? This call to action better. And so think about this, right? Like the aggregate advantage over time. You're learning little small things over time, but think about this like over 1 year, over 2 years as you're running these tests, like how much you're actually learning. And this becomes a significant competitive advantage compared to anybody else who is not running these tests, right? And so every single major startup that I know, a lot of my companies, if they aren't not doing this, I kick their butt. Such a basic thing, and there's software that allows you to do this. It doesn't cost you a lot of money. Really, really cheap, and it's like you should get in the practice of doing this. And yeah, the other part, right? So, growth hackers are performing usually 15 to 20 tests to find 1 to 2 improvements. Think about that. Usually at a big company, right? Like they're not like in small startups where you don't have enough traffic. It requires, usually for the larger companies, they're running tons of tests to find out information. Right? And yeah, so what can you test? Offer, headlines, button size, text. Tons of things to do. And this is one of the lift model taken from Chris Gower, right? It's the value proposition, having sense of urgency. So things that actually lift it up is having clear and is it relevant. But things that actually pull down this lift model and the messaging is your website distracting? Does it cause anxiety, right? Like so anxiety is just like when you go to a website and it doesn't look safe and you want somebody to put input your credit card, right? You want somebody to purchase something or leave information behind, they're not going to do it. And so anyways, this is just a great framework to look at and use. And all these frameworks are not mine. I steal it from people who know what they're talking about. And there's nothing wrong with stealing, man. It's like, great artists steal. And so there's great tools like Mixpanel and Kissmetrics, very, very good analytical products. And they're not that expensive. Tons of, there's literally hundreds of analytical products out there. You need to figure out what's the right one for you. And it's the other part, right? Some other questions to ask about, how can you save time? How can you produce better results? These are all the things that people are actually like looking at as a customer, whether you're a B2B customer, whether you're a B2C customer. These are the questions they're asking yourself when they're actually looking at, like, should I use your product? Should I buy your product? You should keep that in mind. The other part is interesting. This is from HubSpot. Most important factor, the design of website. Too many people focus on making the website have a beautiful. Most important thing is like, is it easy to help me find what I'm looking for? It's so obvious, but like, nobody does this. And yeah, so the question is like, who should design your website, right? Who should design your website? Trick question.
Team.
Wrong. It's your website visitor. Right? I mean, let's look better. None of these people are your customer.
End users.
Right. So obvious. So obvious. It's okay.
Are you sure about the previous one?
Huh?
Are you sure about the previous one? Maybe the SEO specialist should design the website.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Maybe the SEO specialist should design the website.
Not always. I mean, is SEO expert your customer? I mean, it's helpful, right? That's one element of it, but that isn't the only factor. I don't totally agree with that. But anyways, so changes from Tim Ash. He wrote the textbook on landing page optimization. And so he runs a conference called the Conversion Conference, something like that. And it's out of Las Vegas. I actually attended it 3 years ago. It's actually really good. So some changes that he made, for example, like, so this is one of his clients, you look at the difference in the business that actually drove, right? Just by making changes like this. It's all tested. $182,000, I could do with $182,000, right? Landing pages, right? So, Match.com, understanding sort of what's good with landing pages. And so Tim Ash's 7 deadly sins, right? Too much text, too many visual distractions, not enough trust signals, right? So trust signals of trustee or something, like there's some basic things. I don't know what it is in this region. In the US, it's trustee. You're asking for too much information right away, right? Like give me all your data, and like I don't even know what you're going to offer me. Having too many choices, unclear call to action, and actually not keeping promises of just actually doing sort of what you say you're going to do, right? And these are other things. Kissmetrics, a friend of mine's company. These are some things that you can test on a landing page. Headline, the hero image, right? What's that mean? Hero image. Proof points, call to action, social proof, right? Like it's how many other people are using this, right? So how many times, the most common example, McDonald's, right? The offline version, billions served, right? Social proof. Just a lot of people are eating our horrible products, so you should eat our horrible products too. Hate McDonald's. And other ones, third-party endorsement, right? Like relevant endorsement. People who actually, in some page, I'll give you an example. I invest in a company where Jamie Oliver is an endorsement, right? And he's helping with like cooking things. He's a cook. He's a good chef, and he probably knows what he's talking about. So anyway, social proof and third-party endorsement. Like you see a lot of software companies where it's like, over 10,000 happy customers or something like that. That's helpful, right? Like, great, other people have done this. You think like, well, I don't follow other people. It's like, no, you do. You're human. Most people do. And clear value proposition. This is when Square first started. It's like, start accepting credit cards today. So clean and crisp, right? So how do you communicate this? So making sure that you have a unique and benefit-oriented. The problem with a lot of people who are technical or product-focused people is like, feature after feature after feature. Like, users don't care. It's like, what is this thing going to do for me, right? What is the benefit? And then, of course, having some supporting sort of text. And then 3 bullet points with the benefits, right? Like, just keep it as simple as possible, right? Understand this is English, right? Like, understand this is for English ones. I have no idea how this is going to look in for Russian or or whatever. So you're gonna need to test this.
The same stuff.
I don't know. I'm just saying I have no idea. You have to test it.
Test it. It's working.
Okay. Good. Awesome. Great. So it does work. Awesome. And making sure you have the same messages, right? I'm trying to. So like the ads. So having the ads be exactly the same as a landing page. Basic things. No stock photos, like just cheap and makes you look like unprofessional. Or I see no offense to the people who pitched me yesterday, you guys use a lot of stock photos and it just looks really bad because you can pull it off like Google. And I've done this presentation is very similar. I'm just saying, it's easy, it just makes me look, it just doesn't look professional. And so what is the right amount of copy? It's sort of the general guidelines is the more expensive and more complicated the offer, the more copy you need, right? The simpler the product, so for example, you're buying a book, $5, $10 book, you don't need a lot of copy. But if you're actually selling, say, a car, you should probably have a lot of, that's not a great example. I can't think of any good example for that. But the point is just the more copy, like software, really, really expensive software, you should probably have a lot more copy, generally speaking, right? And there's another framework, it's called the B equals match, so behavior equals motivation times ability times trigger. It's actually a really, really good methodology. Look up BJ Fogg. He has a whole article on sort of his methodology. And on top of that, just for free trials and offers, you shouldn't need a lot of text in general, right? So these are general guidelines. Test all this stuff for your own product. I don't know if it'll work, but these are just general principles, right? Like everything I'm suggesting, the frameworks of how to look at building and doing CRO. Right? And of course, one obvious thing is, you should optimize for mobile devices. Like I still go to, whether it's big e-commerce sites or even big offline department store, optimize websites for mobile, which is ridiculous, right? Like I still, even in this day, this is 2015, and you still see a lot of even big companies not optimizing for mobile. So it's just something you should think about. Otherwise, you're missing a very, very potential big audience. And of course, please make it modern. You see this like the grandma site, right? Like it's horrible, it's unprofessional. Let me trust you, right? Maybe your grandma might like it. And so, anyways, biggest part, crappy design leads to lower trust and higher friction. And you should not have like flash sliders, blinking items, unless you're in China or Vietnam, maybe that's okay. But like in most other places, it just doesn't look very good.
I believe in America, like when I was reading some like famous tech people, they don't have really great blogs. I mean, like they don't do any fancy stuff. It's just a WordPress.
But
And
sometimes
like,
simple is better,
the
right?
design is nil, I would say. But the value of the text is quite very well.
And WordPress is a basic thing, right?
No,
it's not horrible. It's not like this. Well, you understand the point. And yeah, so other thing, calls to action, add urgency, clear benefits. Use unwanted to make it very clear what the person will get if they click or do whatever on the site, right? And this is a good example. Unbounce, one of our portfolio companies. These guys kick ass, are making so much freaking money. But it's like, wow, the value proposition, right? Build, publish, and A/B test landing pages. Test landing pages without IT. That's a value proposition. Super clear, right? And on top of that, build a high converting landing page now, right? Like that's the button. Awesome. Nice and simple. And they better know how to do this because they sell landing pages, right? So they better know what they're doing. And having registration forms, I keep the registration forms really simple. And so you need to optimize the site, optimize it. Limit the field, simplify the design, test and retest and value designs versus user performance, right? Like you don't want to ask for too much information, you don't want to drag for load time. These are all the things, checklist for UX usability, really, really important. So I'm not going to read through all of it, you'll have this. And so these are some of the sources I basically gotten a lot of this data. And so, the quote for conversion rate optimization is Oscar Wilde, I'm a big fan. Wisdom is a collection of failures. It's like growth hacking is actually a collection of failures, right? You're learning from all the things that you're doing wrong, but as long as you're testing it, that's actually okay. At least you know. That's it. Questions?